Every year, billions of dollars worth of perfectly edible food gets thrown away because of a tiny date printed on a package. And here's the strange part. Most expiration dates actually aren't about safety at all. In a lot of cases, the food isn't really expired. But most of us treat those dates like hard rules, like something suddenly changes overnight. Milk doesn't magically spoil at midnight. Bread doesn't suddenly become dangerous at 12:01 a.m. And yet, the moment we see that date pass, something psychological happens. The food feels unsafe, even if it looks completely normal.
Behind every system, every habit, and every piece of technology, there's usually a deeper story, a hidden pattern, a quiet detail, an explanation most people never hear. Welcome to Plain AI Explained. Psychologists have a name for this. It's called categorical thinking. Our brains like clean boundaries. Safe or unsafe. Fresh or expired. Good or bad. But food doesn't actually work that way. Most foods change gradually, little by little, through moisture loss, oxidation, bacteria, and time. Not all at once. And honestly, for most of human history, people already understood that. Before modern supermarkets, people relied on their senses. They smelled food, looked for mold, touched it, cooked carefully. But eventually, industrial food systems changed everything. Food started traveling farther. Supply chains became massive. And suddenly, consumers had no idea how old their food really was. So manufacturers started experimenting with freshness labels. At first, the systems were surprisingly secretive. Some companies used hidden color codes. Others used numbers only employees could understand. A few even changed the codes every month just to confuse competitors. But by the 1970s, consumers wanted clearer labels, and expiration dates started appearing everywhere. The strange part is, even today, there still isn't one universal system for most foods in the United States. Except for infant formula, many date labels are actually voluntary, which means phrases like best by, sell by, and use by often mean completely different things. Sell by is usually for store inventory. Best by normally refers to quality, texture, flavor, freshness, and even use by doesn't always mean danger. A lot of the time, it simply means peak quality. But psychologically, we interpret all of them the same way. Expired means bad, even when that isn't necessarily true. To really understand expiration dates, you have to separate two completely different things: quality decline and safety risk. Quality decline is usually harmless. Chips go stale. Bread dries out. Cereal loses its crunch. Chocolate develops that pale white coating people think is mold, even though it usually isn't. The food may not taste great anymore, but it often isn't dangerous. Safety is different. That's about microbial growth, bacteria, mold, yeast, and those depend heavily on temperature. A carton of milk sitting in a hot car for 4 hours can become unsafe before the printed date even arrives. Meanwhile, unopened yogurt stored properly in a cold refrigerator might stay perfectly fine well afterward, which means the printed date itself is only part of the story. Storage matters just as much, sometimes even more. Food companies actually spend a huge amount of time studying shelf life. Scientists test products under different temperatures, humidity levels, transport conditions, and storage environments. But companies also build in safety buffers, because they can't predict what happens after the product leaves the store. Some refrigerators run colder than others. Some foods sit in warm cars. Some products get opened over and over again. So instead of predicting one exact danger moment, companies often create conservative estimates. And interestingly, those labels can even change how food tastes to us psychologically. Studies show people rate identical foods as tasting worse if they believe the food is expired, even when both samples are perfectly fresh. The label changes the experience before the food even touches the tongue. And all of this confusion leads to something enormous: food waste. Millions of tons of edible food get thrown away every year. partly because people misunderstand date labels. And that waste goes far beyond the food itself. A single discarded carton of milk also represents wasted water, fuel, electricity, packaging, labor, and farmland. At the same time, expiration labels still do matter for certain foods. Fresh seafood, prepared meals, improperly stored products. Those can absolutely become dangerous. So the goal isn't to ignore labels completely. It's learning to combine them with observation, storage conditions, and common sense. Something humans actually did naturally for thousands of years. Expiration dates were created to simplify a very complicated system. But somewhere along the way, many of us stopped seeing them as guidelines and started seeing them as absolute truths. Maybe because certainty feels comforting, even when reality is more complicated. Because food doesn't operate in perfect binary rules. It changes gradually, quietly, one small step at a time. So next time you see a date on a package, you might pause for a second before throwing it away. Because sometimes, the most surprising stories are hiding inside the ordinary things we barely notice. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more surprising stories behind the everyday world around us.